Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, social marketers from around the world. My name is Patrick Cook, and as president of the International Social Marketing Association, it's both my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to the 35th in a series of webinars designed to advance social marketing teaching, research, and practice. I'm here today with a great crew with Christine Jennings, Kathleen Sadler, Dave Cutter, and Julie Yegen. Christine and Catherine have worked to arrange today's webinar and will manage the questions that you may have for Julie. Julie is, of course, our featured guest speaker today, and Dave Cutter is our technical host for the webinar series. Before I pass it along to the team, I just had a few announcements wanted to let you know about. First of all, many of you or some of you are joining us as the perhaps a first-time participant in our webinars. We wanted to let you know that the benefits of joining our association, the International Social Marketing Association, are great. Of course, there are the webinars. Right now, this one is free today, but usually there's a cost to it. But if you're a member, of course, it's free. We have a great set of newsletters. We are involved in organizing many of the conferences, the World Social Marketing, the North American Social Marketing Conference, and others. And of course, there's the great event boards, a board on our website. By joining ISMA or one of our regional associations, you also are joining a federation of professionals, which we think is probably the biggest benefit. So you join more than 1,000 social marketing professionals from around the world who are engaged in the practice of social marketing. I also wanted to let you know that we have a board election happening right now. We are inviting nominations for the board. We have 5 open positions. If you are interested in joining the board, please check out the website. It has all the details. But also know that if you join us as a board member, there are also additional opportunities to be a part of leading the association. We're looking for a membership chair, someone who is responsible for seeing how we can get more members to join ISMA and our regional associations, as well as a volunteer coordinator, which is someone who oversees the efforts of our all-volunteer board and association. And of course, there are volunteer opportunities and putting on the webinar and other events that are sponsored by ISMA are volunteers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
Thanks, Patrick, and welcome everyone. I want to remind you that if there is more than one of you at your location, we'd really appreciate it if you would let us know how many you are using the chat box. That will help us get a more accurate participation count. Also, we encourage you to ask questions using the chat text box as they come to you. You don't need to wait until the end of the talk to submit those. We'll answer your questions at the end in about the same order as they come in during the webinar. Moderator for today's webinar, Catherine.
Good morning, all. Or good afternoon or good evening, depending on what part of the world you are in. Thanks, Christine. I'm happy to introduce Julie Yegen as the featured presenter for today's webinar. And Julie is a senior digital media manager with 10 years of communication experience. She leads digital and social media strategies at WestStat for federal public health campaigns, currently focused on heart health, adolescent and school health, and HIV prevention. She has also led the WestStat team to victory in Shark Tank Style Design Thinking Competition to find new solutions to teen pregnancy prevention. She is a creative thinker with a penchant for project management and is always considering how digital and social strategy fit within border of communication goals. That being said, Julie, we're fortunate to have you sharing your experience and insights with us in our webinar today. And so let's get started. Over to you.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for having me today. Just a little bit more about me. Within WestStat, I work for our Health Communications Group, which offers a research-driven approach to communication. We have about 80 experts in communication and health behavior theory, research methods, communication planning, social marketing, digital social media, evaluation, runs the gamut. So looking forward to connecting with you all today, and we can get started. So today I'm going to talk about design thinking and share how this process led to a new program called Momentos to reduce teen pregnancy. So one of my favorite ways to describe design thinking is this. At its core, design thinking is about stepping back from a problem and trying to understand the infinite possibilities before diving into just one solution. A key element of design thinking is that it's human-centered, which means you start from what people need or want. You figure out their motivations and the problems that they're facing. So that means that empathy is key. You really need to deeply understand the people you're looking to serve so you can dream up lots of ideas and create real, innovative, new solutions that are rooted in people's actual needs. Human-centered design it's uniquely situated to arrive at solutions that are first desirable, second feasible, and third viable. So by starting with humans, their hopes, their fears, their needs, we quickly uncover what's most desirable. But that's really just one lens to look at our solutions through. So once we've determined a range of solutions that could appeal to our audience, we can then start to hone in on what is technically feasible to actually implement, and then how to make the solution financially viable. So it's a balancing act, but this is all critical for designing solutions that are successful and sustainable, and not just, hey, that sounds like a cool idea. So there are multiple frameworks for the design thinking process. This is just one of them. This is a framework from Ideate, and it breaks down the process into 6 phases. So I will talk through each of these now. The first phase is empathize. So because the problems that you're trying to solve are rarely your own problems, you need to observe other people's experiences. Interview them, put yourself in their shoes to get beyond what they're saying to what they're thinking and what they're feeling. You're trying to understand their needs and their pain points. So this means qualitative research, but not a focus group in an office building with a two-way mirror. As much as possible, design thinking research is viewing users and their behavior in the context of their lives. So that could mean going to someone's home or even commuting to work with them. This is the best way to become more of an instant expert on the subject because you can really see what they're going through in their life. Next is define. So this is all about making sense of the widespread information that you gathered in the first phase and defining the challenge that you're taking on. So to do that, you need to unpack the information you gathered in your observations, get it out of your head and onto sticky notes, which is a major tool in design thinking. Put down quotes that you heard in your observations, do little doodles or sketches, add any thoughts, words, anything that captures impressions and information about your audience. Put those on sticky notes and put those up on a wall, and then you can start to organize it. You can ask yourself, what needs are emerging that you could address. Next is ideate. So to transition from identifying problems to creating solutions, you go wide in terms of ideas. So this is still early in the design process, so it's not a time to edit yourself. While brainstorming, some good brainstorming rules are to encourage as many wild, impossible, and silly ideas as you can. Totally separate the generation of ideas from the evaluation of ideas. So like improv, this is all about yes and instead of no but. And just remember that the weirdest ideas can spark relevant and reasonable ones. So the best ideas can come from thinking, often do come from thinking beyond predictable solutions. Prototyping is the next stage. This is to get ideas out of your head and into some physical form. It should be a simple, cheap, and fast way to shape ideas so you can experience and interact with them. Before I started this process myself and I learned more about it, I always thought of prototyping as something much more difficult than what design thinking calls for. So the idea here is to fail quickly and cheaply. Committing as few resources as possible to each idea just means that less time and money is invested up front. So here are just examples, think low budget, quick arts and crafts, and not something costly that you would need an engineer to create. It can be anything that a user can interact with. So whether that's a wall of Post-it notes, a storyboard, maybe it's a role play scenario, a little less tangible, but you're still acting something out. On the screen here is an example of prototyping using modeling clay. This was just a design thinking exercise that we did to come up with a more comfortable exam room experience at a doctor's office, just as a way of talking through the process. But you'll see that we have, it's fun and it's nice to get your kind of hands involved. I really like the way Nielsen Norman Group explains it. They're world-renowned usability experts. And so they explain the value of physical prototyping to build tangible representations of our ideas, and that helps us energize the team by physically and mentally engaging people differently than when they just kind of passively sit and listen to a typical meeting. It reduces distractions because it's difficult to check email or social media when you're working with your hands to build tangible things. And it helps you gain a deeper understanding of the value of the ideas and feel more invested in the design decision. And then here are just a few ideas for supplies to consider for this kind of prototyping. I mentioned modeling clay or Play-Doh, wire, toothpicks, things like that. That'll help get you started. The next phase is where users can experience and react to your ideas. So let people use your prototype, listen to what they say, and also observe what they do. Sometimes those are different. Sometimes testing reveals that not only did you not get the solution quite right, but also that you maybe failed to frame the problem correctly. So this part of the process helps you refine your prototype, learn more about your user, and identify whether you're addressing the right need. And then the last step is to implement. Don Norman, again with Nielsen Norman Group, says that we need more design doing. So design thinking isn't magic. It's about taking an idea in your head and transforming it into something real. And that's always going to be a long and challenging process. And if you're doing it right, it's going to feel like work the whole time, the whole spectrum along all of these phases. As impactful as design thinking can be, it only leads to true innovation if the vision is executed. And you're not done there because this is not a linear process. Iteration is fundamental in the design thinking process. You'll prototype and test, and then do a new prototype and test that. You'll get to a new stage of development and need to ideate, and then prototype and test. And you can go in various orders as you move along this framework. So let me tell you how we went through this process to come up with a program to reduce teen pregnancy. So we were tasked with using design thinking to come up with a technological solution to teen pregnancy prevention. The task was as broad as that. So before we could get into the empathize phase, we had to figure out how we wanted to at least begin to narrow in on the problem. So we were drawn to the Hispanic Latino population because Hispanic Latino teens have the highest birth rate of any U.S. teen population. Youth are also more likely than their counterparts to be influenced by parents in their sexual decision-making, research shows. But resources specifically designed for Hispanic Latino parents to address teen sexuality are lacking. So we first defined our target audience as Spanish-dominant Hispanic Latino parents who are often less acculturated and have a lower socioeconomic status. And that's all we really started with. We didn't know what would make sense for parents. We had some guesses, but we didn't let that influence the process. We really needed to learn from the experts, and in design thinking, as I was saying before, that means the user. So we began to gather inspiration. We interviewed parents at work, at clinics in their communities, in their homes, and during our interviews, we aimed to be non-judgmental, listen more than talk, the big tenet for design thinking, formative research, be respectful, and recognize that parents are the experts on their children. So we asked broad questions too, like, tell me about your day yesterday, and pointed questions like, what would happen if tonight you learned that your teenager is sexually active? And we heard so many things from the parents that we talked to. We really needed to unpack it and figure out what the insights were. So the question is, what makes a good insight? So in general, a good insight is grounded in reality, it's actionable, and it changes the way that we think. So what does that actually mean? Here are questions that you can ask yourself as you review what you heard and observed. So a good insight grounded in reality. So what did people say? What did people do? What do people believe about themselves and the world? Good insight is actionable. What pain points can we remove? What tools do people need? There's something that came up in our conversations about, I wish that this XYZ existed. How does this new thing have to show up in people's lives? If you understand kind of their working life and what they're dealing with at home, can you better understand, when something could be interacted with? When do they have time to kind of focus on what you're trying to address? And it changes the way that we think. What makes our users happy? What was unexpected? Always write down the unexpected notes from your observations, and what seemed contradictory. Was the parent saying one thing versus doing another? Let's write that down. So this is just an example of what our process looked like. We organized quotes into themes and often and then into insights using sticky notes. And here are 4 actual quotes we heard during our interviews with parents, translated into English, when discussing how they talk about pregnancy prevention with their children. I'll just read them off. I told him, put the little thing on your thing. Take care of yourself. I told you, now you know, that's it. I told her I didn't want her to ruin her life. And so here's the insight that our team gathered from hearing this. Parents warn about the dangers of sex without offering practical advice. They rely on euphemisms. And this was a really important insight because our guess going into this process was that we would need to convince parents of the importance of talking with their kids about sexual health, that would be our biggest barrier. And what we found is that it wasn't that parents didn't want to or didn't believe in the importance of communicating with their kids about pregnancy prevention. It's that they didn't know how. They thought they were doing it, and certainly doing a better job than their parents ever did for them, but they were speaking in these euphemisms and vague warnings to take care of yourself. So we realized that we needed a tool that would help parents do a better job of what they were willing and trying to do already. So we got to the Ideate process. This is where you need to go wide with ideas. Could we do a radio show where trusted community leaders discuss teen sexuality and pregnancy prevention and offer parents advice? Could we do something with gaming, a mobile phone game to facilitate information sharing and alleviate discomfort of discussing pregnancy prevention? How about maybe some telehealth where parents can Skype with a health educator? Or maybe text messaging where a moderator offers discussion topics to a group of parents who respond and provide peer-to-peer support. So when we got to prototyping and testing, after getting some feedback, some initial feedback from parents on our broader range of ideas, we decided to focus in on telehealth and text messaging. Those are the ones that rose to the top. So we narrowed our ideas to 3 prototypes. And one thing about design thinking is that you're going wide sometimes and you're going narrow other times, and wide and narrow. So this is a point where we narrowed some of our ideas into these prototypes. One was a group texting moderated by a stranger. The other is group texting moderated by a trusted parent educator. Wanted to see if there was a difference there. And the other was one-on-one telehealth sessions with a parent educator, just on mobile phones. So we heard from parents first that texting was more convenient than telehealth. So right away that started to push us more toward the first two. Group texting, it did not inspire the kind of peer-to-peer support that we had hoped that it would. It actually inhibited open dialogue. One-on-one communication with a trusted voice allowed parents to open up. It really seemed like they felt more comfortable. And we also learned that parents liked receiving resources, but sometimes they had questions about them. So a dialogue with a health educator provided personalized guidance. Using all of this information, and after more ideating and prototyping and testing, we came up with our product, which we piloted in a 6-month program. So Momentos is a weekly text message for Spanish-speaking parents with practical advice for communicating with their children about sexual health. And here's how it works. When parents enroll, they fill out a questionnaire that helps us customize the content based on the age and gender of their children. Parents receive a text message from Momentos once a week, and all texts are personalized with their name. They include a teaser for that week's topic and a link to a mobile landing page where they can read a short article with information on the topic and see links to other resources. And often those links are to videos to help explain the information more visually. Because teen pregnancy doesn't exist in a vacuum, we developed content that contextualizes sexual health and pregnancy prevention among related topics like healthy relationships, body image. We even had a week where we talked about sexual abuse. And it was all in a culturally appropriate way. We wrote the content in Spanish first and only translated it to English for the English-speaking members of our team to be able to follow along. We also hosted periodic Q&A sessions. These were inspired by our learnings from our telehealth prototype. So these were one-day sessions where parents could text questions directly to Momentos in the same text conversation they had been receiving all their Momentos information in, and they would receive an answer from a health expert within 24 to 48 hours. And we did all of this with the help of our partner. Although we had originally envisioned working with a local community-based organization to recruit probably a maximum of about 100 local parents, we ultimately found a partner with national reach and also a mobile texting platform to use. So Saber es Poder is a mobile-first platform with a network of over 750,000 Hispanic Latino members across the country. And interestingly, it wasn't until we were pretty far along in the planning process for the pilot that we found them. And it's a great example of how design thinking gave us the room to pivot toward what ended up being kind of a game changer for the success of our program. The partnership provided us with not only the platform to send the text messages, but also access to their huge network of members. Their infrastructure really supported our vision and allowed us to plug into this national network that was already a trusted source of information, which we learned was key in all of our formative research. And we were really happy with the pilot results. During our 6-month pilot, we enrolled nearly 600 parents into the program, which was a definite increase from what we originally thought we'd be able to do from the start. And we conducted surveys with parents, and the survey results at the end of the pilot showed 83% of parents read at least 3 to 4 messages, and these were weekly for 6 months. 63% of parents feel more confident talking about sex with their children. 91% of parents used content to initiate conversations, and 74% said they would continue participating in Momentos for a year or more. We also had actual kind of click-through data from the platform. The Momentos content had an average click-through rate of 27%, which is more than 3 times above the industry average. It was also the highest click-through rate that our partner, Saber es Poder, had ever seen on their text. So a good sign that the content was relevant. We also analyzed some trend data for the small subset of survey respondents who took the pre and post test. So the overall quality of communication between parent and child increased by the end of the pilot from 2.26 to 2.271. Parents' confidence in talking to their children about pregnancy prevention and sex rose as well. And before we started, almost half the sample had not talked to their child about these topics in the last 6 months. And then after the program, 85% had talked to their child at least once. Our content always aims to instill confidence in parents and really equip them with the information they need to better communicate with their children about important topics. So as one mom said, I look forward to receiving the text message every Monday. I like knowing that I can count on this program to teach me things I was never taught by my parents. It's kind of full circle from what we heard in the early stages. So in closing, just some final overarching tips for embracing design thinking. Question your assumptions. When you don't have to have the solution right away, it can be liberating, so embrace that. Remember to articulate the design challenge. Framing the right problem is the only way to create the right solution. Generate a wide range of possible solutions. Go for quantity and extremes. Seek input from the audience often, not just in the beginning. You're asking questions and getting feedback as often as possible because they are your experts. Shift course in light of new information. Be ready to pivot, expect to pivot. It's the best way to refine your solution. And then iterate. Continue pushing and listening and testing. If you want to learn more about Momentos, you can visit our website, westat.com/Momentos, where you'll also find a great testimonial video from several of the parents who participated in the program. It's really nice to hear from them. And with that, thank you so much again for tuning in to learn more about the design thinking process that led us to Momentos. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have today, and feel free to email me after the webinar. My email address is on this slide, julieyegen@westat.com, and I'll turn it back over.
Wonderful job, Julie. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I do have some questions for you. The first one deals, I guess, with what's next for Momentos. Now that the pilot is done, is the text message platform up and running so we can refer people to it?
So Momentos is not currently active, unfortunately, and that's because we're seeking new funding to continue the program. So if there is any interest in talking about partnership or collaboration opportunities, we'd love to talk more. Our hope is that in the next iteration of it, we can focus on things like enhancing the visual and audio assets that we share with parents. We heard a lot of positive feedback about being able to watch or listen to something. We also have talked about potentially expanding the focus of our content to other family health topics, since so much of our program is about enhancing communication between parents and children. We've even talked about with parents in our program about a companion piece for their teens. So regardless of what we do next, it's all about being open to the possibilities, always improving and testing and asking questions, because that's what design thinking has taught us along the way.
Great, thank you. And the other one is more of an evaluation style question. And it's a good question I would like to have asked. Have you ever experienced a perceived prejudice against the validity of the outcome of the design thinking, since it would be considered, quote, not scientific enough by some evaluators?
Yes, that's a great question. Working for a research organization in Westat, I think there was some of that, internally, kind of wondering, is this rigorous enough? And what our answer was I guess I should say, we had the luxury of working on this particular project that centered around design thinking. So it wasn't a matter of choice whether we would be using it or not. And I think because we had that opportunity to show what the design thinking process could do, where it could lead us, how some of the principles could be incorporated into our other projects and day-to-day work, we were able to convince others that it was worthwhile. yes, still not maybe as rigorous as some of the other evaluations that we would be doing on our other projects, but it doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. And hey, if there's budgeting constraints and we can't do as rigorous of a evaluation, this might be one way to at least start putting ourselves in the mindset of our audience with this kind of formative research that we conducted in the beginning. So it's, yeah, not an easy or a straight answer, but we did run into challenges, but I think that the process can speak for itself.
Great, thank you. Another question would be, what would you recommend if you want to start introducing design thinking into a workplace that hasn't done something like this already?
Yeah, so if you don't, like I said, if you don't have that luxury like we did to dedicate a project to learning about this, I think my best advice is to start small. So create small experiments that allow your team to practice gathering data in this way, testing frequently, iterating quickly. If you can embrace some of the core tenets of the design thinking process, I think that is your first step. We do this at WestAd. So not every project has the time to dedicate to the official design thinking way of doing things, but we'll still brainstorm, encourage wild ideas, go for quantity, use sticky notes, which is a simple one, organize those sticky notes thematically. It's kind of a different way of thinking, and try to implement some more basic testing at various points along the way. If you do have any opportunities for professional development, I would recommend attending a design thinking workshop or training. You can read about it all you want, you can listen to me, but actually having experts walk you through the process in a hands-on way is really helpful. I found that this is the kind of thing you have to keep doing to be good at. I still have to reference all my notes and handouts to think through all the various steps. A few other things, arguments to be made for design thinking are that it gets individuals and teams out of silos. It helps you really step away from the day-to-day to look at the bigger picture. And it's about innovation. So, if you're stuck on something, this could be an interesting process to introduce. And then my last point here, because I get this question a lot, is if there is a way to do it, try doing it two ways, meaning the way that you're supposed to, this kind of status quo of how you approach a task, and then also by using design thinking. You can meet expectations for the type of work that needs to be done, but hopefully also show the value of design thinking when you come up with these new ideas. If that's possible, that may help you start building success stories and proof points like we had the opportunity to do with this specific project in Momentos.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much again, Julie. I'm going to turn this back over to Christine.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Julie. And thanks, everyone, for your participation in today's very interesting webinar. Before we wrap up, just a few updates. On your screen are a couple of quick questions regarding the quality of today's webinar. If you would be so kind as to fill these in, that will help us review our sessions, and we use that information to plan our future webinar sessions. It's always really helpful to know your feedback on things like suitable times of the day, topics you'd like us to cover, or other changes you might like to see. So if you could answer those two questions, and if you have other feedback, please add that right in the chat box. We really depend on feedback from people who've participated in our webinar. So don't be shy with your feedback. And while you're doing that, I want to make sure that we share a little bit of information about our upcoming events with the International Social Marketing Association. These events are available for your reference on the ISMA website, and you can also find other events that are regularly updated on the site as well. So keep an eye on the website for details on events. And you can also find details, that's where we're posting our information on our future ISMA webinars. We have about 5 to 6 webinars a year from all around the world. This one is in conjunction with the Social Marketing Association of North America, but we also feature speakers from other parts of the world. So keep an eye on what's coming. If you're not a member now, we encourage you to sign up and join our federation. It's a great opportunity to stay connected and hear about really interesting things that your peers are doing, not only here in North America, but also around the world. So I'd like to thank the wonderful Dave Cutter for handling all of today's important technical aspects of our webinar, as well as the wider volunteer team here. We all volunteer our time to organize these events and webinars and information for our peers in social marketing around the world. Patrick, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Christine. And thank you, everyone. Julie, it was a fascinating webinar and look at a new technique that we as social marketers can incorporate into our practice. So I also wanted to echo Christine's thanks of Dave and Catherine and their efforts in pulling together the webinar. Also wanted to thank you, the members and the guests who are joining us today for the ISMA webinar. We would love to have you join us again, and please do consider joining the International Social Marketing Association or one of your regional associations if you are not already a member. Until then, keep, as Christine said, keep visiting our website, share your events on the calendar there, and we will keep you posted on future events coming up. So this is the International Social Marketing Association, and we now conclude today's webinar.